Welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast, a podcast for everyone with an entrepreneurial spirit. Every week, I am joined by successful guests in all different industries and stages of business who will share what their experience was like transitioning from employee to boss. This is a resource for you if you're wanting to start a business, go all in on your side hustle, get to the next level in your thriving business, or just hear what it's like taking the leap to becoming your own boss. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast production agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. Let's dive into today's topic. Hey, Arika. Welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast. Thanks so much for joining me here today.
It's a pleasure to be here and so excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, so we met months and months ago at a Seattle Chamber of Commerce event, and what you do is really interesting, working with leaders, talking about burnout. These are things that, at the time that this episode will be coming out is the end of the year, right? So it's a time where we can analyze what we've done in the year prior and how we're going to make changes going into 2026. Or, you can analyze this at any time in the year if the listeners are listening later. But before we get into all of this, I would love to hear what your journey from employee to boss looked like.
So my journey to employee to boss, it came about, I think, in an unexpected way. I was an employee for probably 20 plus years at various places. I did, in some points of my career, work with entrepreneurs. And last year, I decided to start my own business. I had been in corporate for a long time, and the things that I really loved about my corporate role were really around coaching the team, developing others, and helping people to realize their potential within the corporate boundaries. And now I'm doing that independently, working as a leadership coach, as well as doing consulting in the space of like leadership workshops and team development. And that's what I do on my day to day.
Yeah. Did you have a turning point that made you realize you wanted to start your own business?
I think for me, it was really about having more control over defining what I do, how I do it, and creating something that was really more connected with my own sort of purpose and in a way that gave me freedom.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you decided you wanted to start your own business, like what steps did you actually take?
So I mean, there were a few things that were like really simple, like
Yeah.
go online and set up an LLC and follow those instructions. And then another component of my work, it was really important for me being a coach that I get credentialed.
Mhm.
So I spent a good deal of time actually building the credentials so that I could go around, I could approach coaching from a way that was really results oriented. So while setting up my business and building my customer base in the background, I was also doing a course. I did a course at Brown University, got my certification from there, and then also got my international coaching certification. So I was building the business, building some clients, and also getting my certification. And I think more recently, one of the things that I did was also join a community of others that are in this space and doing the transition into coaching specifically.
Cool.
Because I've always found it important to have a space where I could go ask like the dumb questions, related to this type of business, as well as, have a sounding board myself.
Yeah.
And as a coach, I'm always valuing the sounding board aspects of what it takes to build and run a business.
Yeah, and having those resources and people that know what you're going through makes online entrepreneurship a lot easier. I mean, we're both here in the Seattle community, and there's a ton of Seattle entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting when I connect with people in other cities and states, and most of my clients are in other cities and states, and just hearing how they build their businesses and, having that online connections definitely makes it easier to be in this online business.
Absolutely. And just being able to make those connections so that and commiserate with people on the best days as well as
Yeah.
the most challenging days and
The not
having a
so
place
best
to
days.
celebrate.
Totally, totally. No, I love that. And, I love that we're having this conversation because one thing that I know a lot of entrepreneurs at any point in business, like beginning, middle, a few years in, 10 years in, we have this feeling that we always have to be on, right? Like we're going on vacation, we're bringing our laptop. We're going out to dinner, a client might email us. I know I learned early on that I cannot have clients have my phone number because if they text me, I just spiral. It could be just like, "Hey, can you do this whenever you have a chance?" But just like seeing that text like makes my heart rate spike. So I knew that that was a boundary for me. But I'm curious because there is obviously stress that comes with being any business owner. There's stress that comes with being alive. How do we know what stress is normal and what is leading towards burnout as an entrepreneur?
That's such a good question. And if you look at the data, the statistics say that 75% of professionals worldwide will experience burnout at some point. But I think as an entrepreneur, we don't necessarily name it as burnout because we just call it the grind or the hustle, right? And we just think, oh, well, it's something that we need to do to help our business to succeed. But really what burnout is, if we think about the definition of burnout, it's really chronic stress without
Mhm.
recovery. It's when we keep doing the same things, and it's the feelings of exhaustion, or when we get to that point where it's too much and we just become cynics, or we might have a big win, but it's like it's not good enough. It doesn't feel like an accomplishment, and we just have to keep chasing the next thing. That's what burnout looks like. And for entrepreneurs, I think we often just say it's the hustle, it's what we need to do to get the business going.
Yeah, no, that's hitting home. It's hitting home, I will say. There's been times in my business or like everyone that I know in business where it's just like, oh, it's just the season. It's just the season. Like, do we have to normalize these late hours and feeling stress all day? I don't think so.
No, no. And I think it's really important to, remember that it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Hmm.
And anyone who's training for a marathon, you get your schedule of the runs that you need to do before your marathon. And there's always rest days
Hmm.
built into that schedule because our body and our muscles physically need to rest so that they can perform at their best on the day that you're doing the marathon and as you're building up to that mileage. And our brain is also a muscle. And if we think about work as a marathon and not a sprint, it's really about how do we make sure that we tap into what's giving us energy and where we need to rest so that we can give our brain some time to slow down and give it time to build itself, and we can show up better for our business, make better decisions, be more creative. That rest time is really important.
Yeah. And you mentioned like how we normalize it by saying this is, or we relabel burnout by saying this is
Mm-hmm.
hustle culture, this is what we have to do. And I think a lot of the people that we follow online, mostly not limited to, but a lot of men, entrepreneurs, do talk about this like hustle, hustle, hustle. And then we bring that into our own business. And I'm wondering, what are the beliefs or mindsets that actually fuel this burnout? Even if people love what they do, right?
Yeah, that's really important because our beliefs, you were so connected to our beliefs and mindsets, and really understanding what's driving you to hustle, hustle, hustle from a mindset perspective gives you the opportunity to sort of tune into what to do better. So some of those beliefs are, if I don't do it, it won't get done right. And so that means that you're just taking over more responsibility and you might not want to delegate. And, you know, I've personally, that personally resonates with me.
Yeah. I'm
And
like,
I'm,
have you been listening to me lately, Erica? Like, geez.
yeah, yeah, I do have trouble delegating. And so I have to remind myself that teaching someone how to do the work to support me, like one of my team members, is actually ultimately going to help me get to where I need to. Another belief is that I need to say yes to everything,
Yeah.
or I can't say no.
Hmm.
And that really means that you have trouble with boundaries. And that was me for many years because when I was younger in my career, I said yes to everything and it helped me grow and get opportunities really quickly. But life gets complicated and you can't always say yes to everything. And I personally experienced burnout. It was just like a crash where I was saying yes to everything for many years. And then all of a sudden I couldn't say yes to anything else because nothing was working. And the other belief is I'll rest when things calm down. And if you have that belief, I would challenge you with the reflection of, if you repeated your typical day for 100 days, would your life get better or worse? And sometimes actually things might not calm down. It's really more about managing your energy and managing your focus so that you can get through the storm and the unpredictability of what it means to run a business.
Yeah. Because there is that, right? There is being able to go with the flow a little bit. And like, I know summer, which I think is like when we connected, is always such a
Yeah.
slow time for me in my
Uh-huh.
business. Like, that's not really when I sign new clients. I just keep working with the same ones that I always do. But this time of year, we're recording this in October, end of October,
Mm-hmm.
everything picks up. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like this rush of everything. And so I always remind myself of this in the summer that I'm like, be thankful now because the tsunami is coming in.
Yeah. And when you have a business that's seasonal or cyclical, you should think about what are the strategies that I can use to take advantage of the low time or
Yeah,
optimize the busy time to make things work for me and the
yeah.
way that my business needs to flow.
Totally, totally. So I feel like people are going to listen to this and be like, I might be burnt out. Or maybe they're thinking back and being like, I was burnt out earlier this year. What do they do? Like,
I
what do
think
they
the
do?
first step is really awareness.
Okay.
And recovery also always starts with awareness, and it's small resets. You can't change the world overnight, but you also just don't want to like crash and burn like I did earlier in my career. So starting with awareness, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And that really means tuning in and listening to your mind and body, not listening to all of the noise outside, but
Yeah.
like tuning in, getting quiet with yourself and see what shows up for you. So it could be like you're feeling overwhelmed, or you're like working weekends to get ahead, or could show up in your emotions. For me, it's I get grouchy, irritable, like I don't sleep properly. I procrastinate on the important things because I'm doing things like rage cleaning. Like my kitchen
Mhm.
really needs to be clean right now because I'm distracting myself from the 80,000 things on my to-do list. And so it's moments like that where I know that I need to actually start to
Yeah.
make sure that I have the right interventions in place. So once you tune in with yourself, I think the next thing is really look at where you can unplug and flip the script from I always need to be on to be unplugging for a little bit is going to fuel sharper thinking and better decision making. And so some of that is building intentional breaks into your day, like stepping away from your screen, meditation if you like to do that, a few minutes of deep breathing. It's really about how do I make sure that I'm working smarter and
Yeah.
not harder.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And then there's also things to do, like to reprioritize your schedule slash your life. If you're an entrepreneur, it's your life too.
Yeah.
And building healthy habits one by one and just picking, one or two things that you want to focus on in a week and then build them like building blocks.
Mm.
So it could be like next week, I'm going to focus on adding two things into my daily work schedule for myself that are going to help me to refocus. So that could be blocking some focused time for uninterrupted work. Or
Yeah.
it could be, I'm going to make sure that I have some transition rituals that I create in my day, so that I stop work every day at X time and then I go walk the dog and then I come back into the house and then I've transitioned from work to home.
No longer work. Yes.
Yeah, right. Especially when you're an entrepreneur that might be working from home. The
Totally.
transition rituals are really important.
Yeah.
Also, things to do to sort of refresh your mind that are outside of like, what do I need to block into my calendar? And those are things like you could just make sure you just integrate 5 minutes of fun into your day. So it could be, you and I like dogs. It could
Yes.
be 5 minutes on social media of the funniest dog videos. And I'm not
Mm.
talking about like the social media that drags you down. I'm talking about the social media that makes you laugh.
Yes.
Or it could be blast some music in your kitchen and dance for 5 minutes.
I like.
And that's like actually a physical reset that will help to rebalance some things in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the third thing for refreshing is phone a friend. I call it phone a friend because the science says you really only need 8 minutes of talking with a friend to actually decompress and lower cortisol levels. And that actually having robust social connections is really important to mental well-being and resilience.
Mm. I feel like that's really manageable to get in our days. So I love those steps. Like
Yeah,
it's
I'm
not
all
like,
about.
yeah, it's not some like big overhaul of like a whole new way of doing things. It's like adding these things. And I'm curious, you mentioned a crash and burn in the beginning
Mhm.
of your, careers. Are you okay if I ask you a few questions about that?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
When did that happen and what did that look like?
So what it looked like was, and I'll just give you an example of a day,
Yeah.
working all day, coming home, you know, giving my toddler some attention,
Mm-hmm.
putting my toddler to bed, dialing back into work, dialing back in, we don't dial, but like plugging back into work
Yes.
in the evening, being on deck for a 10 p.m. in my time zone global call where I was
Oh,
going to
wow.
present a point of view on something.
At
But,
10 p.m., I have no point of views on anything. Like,
and then my toddler waking up at 9:45 p.m. wanting attention and me putting a pillow down on the floor of my office and then putting her to sleep there while I do my work.
mm,
And it's because I was very good at saying yes to everything and very bad at creating boundaries. And I thought, I'm going to do this thing because it's going to be good for my career. But as I got older and my life got more complicated, the ways that worked for me before of just saying yes to everything, digging in and overperforming, at some point it just didn't work.
yeah.
And so what I ended up doing was talking with as many bosses as I could to negotiate a flexible work arrangement because I figured at that point that the only thing that I could buy, or the thing that I most wanted to buy with all of the money that you make in corporate, was time, which is really expensive. But what I did is I negotiated a flexible work arrangement and went from working or getting paid for like 5 days a week to 3 days a week.
Okay.
So I gave myself a 40% pay cut because I didn't know how to manage anything.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's what burnout looked like for me. It
Yeah.
was like I just need to give myself a huge pay cut so that I could
Yeah.
start over in thinking about how I juggle and manage things.
Looking back, what would have prevented that?
I think for me, it was really about the boundaries, speaking up for what works for me and what
Yeah,
doesn't, being more connected, I think, to my own sense of purpose and what's so that I'm moving in the direction that from a career perspective, that really resonated with me to help me get through some of those hard days, but also doing it in a way that I feel like I have the right balance between my work and my life.
totally.
And I don't know if work-life balance is the right word. It's really more of a juggle. But at that
Yeah.
point of my life, I felt like I was juggling 18 balls and dropping them all.
Mm,
And and I think having a sense of purpose or focus or working on something that drives you in the right way versus maybe
yeah,
someone else's corporate agenda is one thing to really sort of think about when you're in those moments, because it's going to give you a little bit of a different drive
yes,
in addition to like just working on yourself. And for me, that was learning how to create boundaries, learning how to say no, and focusing on the things that are going to help me to feel good about what I'm producing from a work perspective that's
mhm,
connected more to purpose.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you remember the very first, like, for anyone who's maybe thinking that they might be nearing a burnout, do you remember the first sign that you personally had before you had to do all these things, take the 40% pay cut? Like, what moment could you have caught it? And maybe it was unavoidable. I don't know.
I mean, I think you live and learn.
Yeah.
And I think for me, being one of those type A type of people, I was like, oh, I got this. I can do this. I can add this. I can do this. I can add this. And and I may just be naturally overly optimistic. An overly optimistic type A person just adds things to their calendar. And I think for me, it was the persistent dropping of balls that was like, okay,
Mm,
you said yes to all of these things. And the thing that I was dropping the most, the ball that I was dropping the most was taking care of myself, like cutting back on the sleep. Sleep is the number one thing that you need to actually operate and be healthy. Like your brain is the most important muscle in your body. And I was like, oh, I can just do 4 hours of sleep for years. No. So I was not taking care of myself. And that means that I couldn't actually take care of and make the good decisions that I needed at work. And it also meant that I wasn't necessarily showing up in the right way for my family.
yeah. I think that's such an important point. So many of us put off our workouts because we don't have time or, put off walking the dog to like 5-minute walks or whatever. Like, dogs help, I will say.
They do.
So that might be a tip for everyone who doesn't have a dog, get a dog. But I really appreciate you sharing like your personal story and looking back on it because I think that insight is what a lot of people need. Sometimes we don't take it seriously when we're, oh, I'm stressed. It'll go. Like, what if it doesn't? And what actions will you take to get out of that? So I really appreciate you being open to like look back on your experience with this and all those tips that you shared, like how to prioritize the right things, actions to take, so helpful. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that in the podcast today. Before we get into your action steps for the week, is there anything else you want to share?
I think that if you're feeling like at that point where things are becoming unsustainable, it is totally worth it just to take a moment to check in with yourself. And then maybe just ask yourself, like reflecting on the past week, if it felt like it was too much, think about what's one thing that I can do next week that drains me, that normally drains me, what can I stop doing that drains me? And what's one thing that I can start doing that restores me and gives me energy? And to really think about, as a boss, how do I manage my energy? And what am I doing that is most focused on getting me to the goals for my business versus the noise, which could just be like, what am I doing to be productive?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. No, that makes a lot of sense. And, to that point, managing energy, all of those things, I feel like we sometimes go for resources that will help us, but we don't take the action that will actually make that difference. So that's exactly why I asked this last question of, what are 3 action steps for the audience to take based on this conversation? Because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to that point, like, we will listen to podcasts about maybe stress management. We'll read books. I have a ton of books about how to organize your day, how to organize your life, all of these things. But unless we actually take the action, it's not going to make a difference. So I'm
Right.
curious, what are 3 things that you challenge the audience with this week that will actually make a difference in their life based on our conversation?
I love the 3 things because we shouldn't be doing more than 3 things. It's all about the small steps. So I I would encourage people to reflect on, like, what's one thing that you can do during the day give you energy. And I would encourage you to think about what is one thing that you can do to support and enable boundaries for yourself. And what's one thing that you can do to make sure that you're moving closer to your goals and priorities.
I love that. I love that. I think that's super manageable and it's looking inward, right? Like, what are these things that I can do that I know? And yeah, I think that those are fantastic. So thank you so much
Yeah,
for sharing all of this today. Erica, I'll put the links to you, how to connect with you in the show notes. I'll also put a
fabulous.
link to your leadership reset
Hmm.
toolkit, which is 10 questions to assess your burnout to help realign. So that'll be a super helpful resource for anyone who maybe is finally ready to admit or acknowledge that they're leading towards burnout. So I really appreciate you joining me here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.